We are keeping ourselves from a destiny that we signed up for. Whatever you need will begin to show up. The problem with most of us is that as it begins to show up, we then institute the thing that keeps us from formalizing and manifesting and creating the destiny that we signed up for. It's why I say to you with absolute certainty, when you have the passion, just the presence of the passion and nothing more, that's all you need, just the presence of it, is a guarantee for you that you have the capacity to manifest it, attract it, and create it in whatever form you would like it to show up. Just because you have the passion. And the Tao doesn't teach you to think big. It teaches you to think small. Thinking big is a mistake, according to the Tao. Because when you think big, you can't get big things done. We can only do things in this moment. So it teaches us to be in this moment. It says you can get anywhere from here. It's really simple. You go through what you have to go through, even the torturous things that you have to go through, in order to be able to give. Because the most important thing that you can learn, according to Lao Tzu, is that when you are at one with what is called the hidden virtue, which is the hidden godliness, kindness, goodness, love that is in you and what you came from, when you are in harmony with that, all of your life is about giving. When you're not in harmony with the hidden virtue, all of your life is about getting. So you make the shift from getting, what's in it for me, how much am I going to make, how well am I going to do, what does my ego say, to how may I serve, what may I give, how can I do it.
Wayne Dyer was an icon in self-development and spiritual growth. He wrote over 40 books with an astonishing 21 New York Times bestsellers. His childhood was spent in orphanages and foster homes, but he'd go on to inspire millions and become known as the father of motivation. In this exclusive speech from the Celebrate Your Life stage, Wayne Dyer shares with us the keys to manifesting your dreams, staying in the present moment, and living in harmony with the Tao. Special thanks to Liz Dawn for partnering with us to release this exclusive content on our YouTube channel. Enjoy.
So I want to share with you what has been happening in my life in the last year. It's been a magical year. It's been a transformative year. And I got involved in doing something that not only produced a book, which I completed 2 days ago, but more than it being another book that I've written, it was something that allowed me to see the incredible power of passion and enthusiasm. And when you get it in your hearts, and my objective in the short time that I have here with you today is to convey that to you. What you need, what you're supposed to do, how it will work out, what financing is required, what people you'll need, what circumstances you will need to align with the stars or whatever. All will be taken care of if you stay with your passion. And I'd like to suggest to you that whatever your passion is, and even if you don't know what it is, whatever the feeling you have inside of you that says to you, this is what you're here for, you have to do this. As absurd as it may sound, as ridiculous as it may appear to everyone in your environment, including your husband and your children and your wife and your ex-wife and your grandchildren and your neighbors and the people you work with and the people you encounter everywhere you go. It may sound like the most absurd thing for someone of your age at this time, given these circumstances of your life, to be even contemplating something so crazy, whatever it might be. And yet, if you can hold on to the passion, just hold on to that. Hold on to the passion. What you're doing when you're holding on to the passion is you're holding on to God. Because the word enthusiasm and passion are the same. And theos from the Greek is God. Yasm means within. Enthusiasm is the God within you. The God within you. And this voice, if you read the 10 Secrets for Success and Inner Peace I put out for my children several years ago, I wrote it for my teenagers because I put down in there the 10 most significant and important ideas that I thought they should know long after I was gone. One of those ideas was the second one. It's called don't die with your music still in you, that you came here with music to play. So not dying with your music still in you is a very important idea. It's one of 10 that I carried with me for a long time and wrote it so that they would have it and be able to read that and know what I was speaking about. But beyond that is something that I have come to know, and that is when you have that passion and you hang on to it and you don't let any obstacle come in your way, you're hanging on to God. And another synonym for God is love, right out of the New Testament. God is love, and he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in me, and I in him. So now we're looking at enthusiasm being something, or passion being something that relates to your staying connected to a field of energy that is dominated by something called love, and that is God itself. And we all have this wonderful choice as we come into this world. And the choice is whether we're going to stay aligned with that or not. The writing that I have been doing is from something called the Tao Te Ching. Now the Tao Te Ching, T-A-O, it's pronounced D, but it's Tao. Tao. The Tao Te Ching, the Great Way, was dictated, I should say, 2,500 years ago. It's the longest surviving spiritual text on our planet and the most sales of any other thing other than the Bible, the Tao Te Ching. And very few of us know very much about it, but you will. It's interesting because it was written and created at the very same time as the Bhagavad Gita, 2,500 years ago. Buddha, Lao Tzu were contemporaries, as was Confucius, Zoroaster, Socrates. All of these beings were walking on the planet at the same time. It was a vortex, an intellectual, spiritual vortex. Not long after people were just crawling out of caves, 2,500 years ago. Remember, we think of the Middle Ages. That was 1,200 or 1,300 years later. And this was 500 years. 500 years. 5 centuries before the birth of Christ. This man who lived at God consciousness, at God realization, was dictating to a guard, they say, as he was leaving his village in ancient China, and he gave these verses, and there are 81 of them. 8-1. Infinite source. Once. 81. Bhagavad Gita, being written at the same time, has 18 verses in it. One infinite source. And there are 18 holes on a golf course. I mean, how do you put that all together? There's got to be a connection there. There's got to be. So these 81 verses, I got this idea, and I never know where the next thing is going to come from. And it's why I say to you with absolute certainty, when you have the passion, just the presence of the passion, and nothing more, that's all you need, just the presence of it, is a guarantee for you that you have the capacity to manifest it, attract it, and create it in whatever form you would like it to show up. Just because you have the passion. Because it's a knowing within you. And when you stay with it and align yourself with it, the book you have to write, the music you have to create, the artwork that you have to do, the child that you absolutely must adopt, the business that you have to open up someplace out there that no one else understands or grasps. The thing that won't go away. The thing that won't go away. When you keep it there, when you stay aligned with it, and you keep that alignment in harmony with God, with Spirit, whatever you need will begin to show up. The problem with most of us is that as it begins to show up, we then institute the thing that keeps us from formalizing and manifesting and creating the destiny that we signed up for. Things like doubts. Shakespeare said, our doubts are our traitors. These are traitors. These are things that we live with and we hang on to and we spout and we talk about, and we don't realize that in just the most innocuous and innocent of ways, we are keeping ourselves from a destiny that we signed up for long before we ever entered into this world of form. So I was in England about a year and a half ago. I was lecturing over there, and a friend of mine in the United States, one of my best friends, told me about a book that he thought I should read. He said, it's so well written and it's so impactful. I think you should read it. And then I kept seeing, this is what happens. Carl Jung coined the term synchronicity, or synchrodestiny, as Deepak calls it. And it's this idea that there's sort of a collaboration with fate that begins to take place when we stay connected to and attached to our passion. Not to how it'll happen, not to if it'll happen, not to when it will happen, but just to it. We just stay there. And then we get into that state of bewilderment and awe. And as we stay in that state of bewilderment and awe, we start seeing a change take place. I call this book, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao Te Ching. And it's 81 essays that I channeled from Lao Tzu. And, I say that and I think, ooh, but you know what? I'm 66. It's going to get a little weird now in these last... And when it does, I'm going to point it out so that you don't think I don't know that it's a little weird that I'm channeling a 2,500-year-old Chinaman. But I want to tell you how this happened and then end with something that's, I can't even wait to give you what's going to happen in the last hour. I can hardly wait to get to that one. It's so good. But I got to go through this first. This is even better. So the book was called A Million Little Pieces. Many of you saw it, know about it. It became a huge bestseller. This was before anybody had spoken anything about it, James Fry. And then this huge controversy came up about a memoir and whether all the facts were straight. And he was a drug addict. He was addicted to heroin. He was addicted to crack cocaine. He was drinking 2 or 3 bottles of vodka a day. He was 27 years old. He was days away from death. He was dumped off at up in Minnesota, a place called Hazleton, and went into rehab. And he wrote his account, looking back on it from 18 years of sobriety, looking back on it. And some of the facts were shifted and changed. And as one of my children said, he was a drug addict, and he exaggerated. Is that a big surprise? And the whole controversy that emerged on this subject and so on overshadowed the importance of this book and this man and what it did for so many people whose lives were just ripped out from under them with drugs, prescription drugs, illegal drugs, legal drugs, whatever. It's a huge, huge problem we face in our society today. And it isn't just illegal drugs. It's like you're getting bombarded every day on television, on the radio, on Time Magazine, full-page ads, USA Today, whatever, with more and more and more inclinations to go to your physician and tell them which drugs that you want. And they are invested in the drug companies, and the drug companies are making billions of dollars and charging $10 for a pill that costs a penny. And then the chances of getting an erection that lasts 4 hours that's very real in there, There's got to be a lot of sexual dysfunction in this country because there's a commercial every 2 minutes, isn't there? I don't know. If I have an erection that lasts 4 hours, going to my doctor is the last place I'm heading. I'm telling you that right now. I have several stops I want to make before I show up at doctor's house. So I read this book, and I was fascinated by it. Being a camel myself. A camel is an animal who starts out every day on his knees. He goes to bed every night on his knees. And he goes 24 hours without a drink. I've been a camel for 19 years now. I go to bed and wake up. And addiction is something I'm very, very, very familiar with. Very much of an addictive personality. I started running in 1976. I ran 8 miles. When I finally got to 8 miles. And then it was 1998. It was 22 years later, and I was still running 8 miles every single day for 22 years. Some call it obsessive, some call it addictive, and I've been down that road with things like nicotine and things like alcohol and drugs and caffeine and sugars and things like that have all been things in my own life that I showed up to. And one of the things I've come to know is that everything that you have to deal with, every problem that you face, every struggle you have to overcome, whatever it might be, as the Tao teaches, it has good fortune is hidden in all misfortune. You have to know that. And that the way that the Tao works is that nothing sustains itself the same. So that every storm that shows up in your life, every storm that shows up in the world, has calmness hidden within it, and has a drought hidden within it as well. And it's the way of things. The only constant is the Tao. But the problem with the Tao is, as it says in the first chapter, is that the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. So you can't talk about it. You have to just experience it. You have to go within and come to know that there is a constant. There is an energy. There is a force from which all things originate. All things originate, including you. And particles themselves do not create more particles. So you didn't come from a particle. You came from an energy field that allowed a particle to formulate in a split second called creation. That's the way of Tao. And returning to Tao, verse 40 of the Tao Te Ching says that returning is the way of Tao. Returning is the way of Tao. Returning and yielding. Your job is to return to the place from which you originated. Now some, including the poets, suggest that the only way to do that is through death. T.S. Eliot, the great, was actually born in St. Louis. I don't know if most of you knew that. In 1888. Died in 1965 at the age of 77. Said, we shall cease from exploration. And at the end of our exploring will be to return to the place from which we started and know it for the first time. We shall not cease from exploration. And at the end of all of our exploring shall be to return to the place from which we started and know it for the first time. He's suggesting in that poetic offering for which he won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1948, he's suggesting in there that the only way you'll ever know it is to die. You'll return to the place from which you came, and at your death you will know where you came from in that originating place and know it for the first time. Now, I don't like to argue with T.S. Eliot or Lao Tzu, but I would suggest that we can return and enter into a state of God realization and harmonize ourselves with Tao now and activate it and create it. And in the process, gain all that the originating force allowed or intended us to become, which is what we signed up for before we came. It's possible now, and I'll be talking a little bit later about how to access it and what happens when you do. For now, when you read, or if you do read A Million Little Pieces, you discover that this young man in his 20s, when he went into this rehab facility to overcome something that when people reach that level of addiction, very few ever survive it. People who do crystal meth, they say they have 6 out of 100 recover from it. 94 end up dying. And that's an epidemic where I live on Maui. It's called ICE. 6 out of 100 is the success rate. 94 are going to continue taking it. They're going to get something called meth mouth, which means your teeth turn to the consistency of a peach and fall out and your body deteriorates. And that stuff is out there. And that's just one. So he was doing that as well. But something happened to him in there, and he had a much bigger assignment, if you will, or sign up. Because while he was in this rehab facility, he refused to do the things that the program prescribed for him. He wouldn't do the AA thing. He didn't do the 12 steps. He thought that he didn't want to substitute one kind of addiction for another. He found himself putting it all down, being very resistant to any kind of authority, being very much like the kind of behavior that probably got him going in that whole world of addiction in the first place. But what he did do every day is read the Tao Te Ching, the 81 verses, which you can read in about 81 minutes. Only takes a minute to read a verse of the Tao Te Ching, and then you can study any one of them for a lifetime, as you'll hear a little bit later on. So as I would read through this thing and see him resisting the first step and the second step and not going to meetings and not doing any of the things and being very just resistant to any kind of authority, but he kept saying, the Tao, the Tao. And all this time, while I was reading it, I knew about the Tao. I knew about Lao Tzu. I sort of had a vision of what he looked like, and based on paintings and renderings that had survived over centuries. But I had never really studied it. I taught a course in philosophy at a university back in the 70s, and I would do one lecture on Taoism, just sort of skim through it and get on to the real stuff, Because the Taoists don't believe in a God that is a white, dead male in heaven floating around as a cosmic bellboy who is going to offer you, if you pray hard enough, to something outside of you. As Carl Jung, who was a Taoist, said that the surest way to lose your soul is to believe in a God that exists outside of yourself. The surest way to lose your soul. He also said that the purpose of organized religion is to prevent as many people as possible from having a direct experience of God. A direct experience. A knowing God. So the Tao doesn't teach about knowing about God. The Tao teaches about knowing God. And the Tao sees God in nature and in yourself and in all things, inescapably connected to all things, the source of all creation. It does nothing, but it leaves nothing undone. Doing nothing and leaving nothing undone is a wonderful paradox. Try it sometime. I've been doing that, even in my swim in the morning on the ocean in the Pacific. I've been practicing swimming by doing nothing, but just letting my body do what it knows how to do, just letting it move through the water without my having any effort and just watching. Good example of it right now is there's, 1,500, 2,000 people in this room? There's not one person in here who's beating his heart or her heart. And yet every heart is being beaten. So the Tao teaches all of us that you're doing nothing. You're just being done. You're in the process of being done by a force that is handling everything for you and handled it from the very beginning. Very interesting, because the first 9 months of your life, from the moment of conception until the moment of birth, in those first 9 months, you totally stayed out of the picture. And so did everybody else. It's just, you totally surrendered. You just let go, as they say in the recovery movement. You let go, and what? You let God. You just let God. So you didn't have a nose when they took a little picture in there, but you didn't go through, praying, oh God, please deliver me a nose, and don't put a bump on it, and don't make it look to this or to that. And you handled, everything got handled in exactly divine timing, divine perfection. And you just let go. And so did your mother. You just let go. And allowed. And allowed. And it all happened. And then you were born. And you said, good work, God. I'll take over from here. And so did your parents. And all of your neighbors and your culture will take over. Nice work. And the moment that you did that, you made your biggest mistake. And the Tao, myself here today, teaching about how to get back to that place of doing nothing, but leaving nothing undone. Allowing rather than resisting. Not fighting. So synchronicities begin to happen when the passion is there. And I had finished this book on inspiration and this brand new book about balance called Being in Balance, which has just come out. I'm so proud of, about aligning ourselves and staying connected to our source and keeping a balance between our habits and what we desire. And as always, it's when you have the passion and when you know you're being used, when you start realizing that you're being done, like your body's being done, you know that. I mean, this is a city that has the largest number of plastic surgeons per capita than any city in the world. Yeah, right here, Scottsdale, Arizona. There's one right across the street when I was running this morning. About 400 doctors in there. But you can plasticize everything in your body. It doesn't make any difference. It's still being done. And it's going to leave in divine timing. Exactly when it was supposed to. There's absolutely nothing for you to be concerned about. In the moment of your conception, in the moment of your movement from spirit to form, your birth was handled. Your height was handled. The color of your eyes was handled. Everything that you needed, your body structure, was all handled for you. In the microscopic dot on a pin, you can put 1 billion of these. That's how tiny it was. And everything you needed for this journey was all handled in there. Your death must have been in there if your birth was in there, isn't it? I mean, you're just being done. And if you could be done by staying in rapport with the source from which you originated and know it for the first time, really know it, the ability to be able to attract, manifest, provide what it is that you are here for would become something which would keep you bewildered. It would keep you in a state of awe. You would see it forming. Now, reading A Million Little Pieces, and I was in England, and I picked it up, and I set it down, and then I said, no, I don't want to carry it through because, it was heavy, and it was before it was in paperback, and I wasn't sure. And then I get back, and somebody had sent me a copy. And then, I was sort of thumbing through it, and I gave it to somebody to read, and my children started reading it, and I sent it to one of my daughters who struggles with addictions even to this day, dramatically. In fact, she's right now working on her total sobriety. I've just talked to her half an hour ago, and you can't imagine how much peace there is in knowing that someone is safe in a place being helped and wanting to do it, checking herself in. And then the author appears on a television show that I happen to be flipping through, and then, it's like it just keeps coming at you as if to say, I got something for you to do, and you already signed up to do it a millennia ago or 2,000 millennia ago. How do I get your attention? You got to do it, because unless you just keep saying, no, I can't do that, or it won't work, or I don't have the ability, or I don't have the luck, or these kinds of things have never worked out for me before, or whatever it might be, those things that we call resistance begin to become our mode of dealing with it, and before you know it, resistance is what we start believing in, and then we start believing in our limitations, and we start arguing for them, and defending all the reasons why it can't happen, when all you have to do is be in love. All you have to do is be in love. All you have to do is stay in love. Stay in that place of ecstasy, and then just watch. Just watch. And you'll see it showing up in so many ways. I was still not knowing what this was about. I don't have a drinking problem. It's been 19 years. All right, that's recover. Okay, that's not still working on it. All right, that's not an issue. It's not even a possibility for me. But there it was. And the only thing that kept this man, who was destined to die in a few short months, from going back to it was the Tao Te Ching. Stephen Mitchell's version of the Tao Te Ching, who's an American. So I was thinking about it, and every time I talked to my friend, he would tell me about this, and you got to read this. And I said, read, I got so many other things I'm working on. And he said, you got to read this. I said, why are you bugging me, telling me what I got to read, Do you know what I'm talking about? This is just my experience, but you get these. These things are happening to you now. Even being here, even something I might have said or something, whatever it might be already. Somebody's here who didn't even know they were going to be here this morning and still don't even know who I am. And you may be wondering, what am I doing here? And when's it going to get to the point? And what's what? And the point is you're here. And there's no accidents in this universe. There's an organizing intelligence that's supporting everything. The whole thing is all held together. That same force that's beating every heart in this room is holding the planet in alignment with all the rest of them, and opening the flowers and closing them and providing us with the trees and the food. And it's like the whole thing is all being done. And so I accepted a speaking engagement out in Wyoming, which I didn't want to take, last summer. September, I guess a year ago last September, to speak for some Grand Teton conference or something out there. And I was speaking. I was in England, in fact, and when I left England, I told the woman that kept calling me, a lot like these two here, like Liz and Mother, giving me wonderful people, and I mean that. I said, look, I'm flying in from England, and then I've got to go to Wyoming. And I said, there's no flights for that. And I was, using all the things. I said, it's just not possible. I simply just can't go there. She said, there's no problem with that. We'll send a plane. Her sister's married to Oscar de la Renta, okay, who likes the sister as much as his wife. And so we'll send Oscar de la Renta's plane to you, and we'll pick you up. And I said, no, you don't understand. My daughter has got to, I don't do it unless she goes with me. And he said, that's no problem. She can get on the plane too, and then we'll fly her back to where there we were, flying across the country on this private plane, landing in Jackson Hole, and going off to this Grand Teton thing. And I get the talk, and that night, I met a woman who was also speaking the next morning and doing a workshop at the same conference. Her name is Byron Katie. I'm sure many of you have heard of her. She's a wonderful, wonderful being, one of my all-time favorite human beings on the planet. And I was going through some particular difficulty at that time, family and stuff, And when I finished my talk, about 11, she stayed up with me till almost 3 o'clock in the morning and worked with me doing something called the work. Her whole idea is that we have all of these thoughts. We have so many thoughts that we have every single day. The only problem is that most of them are not true. In fact, hardly any of them are. And yet we act as if they are, and we live by these truths that he must love me and you must do this and things must be that way, and none of them are true. The opposite is just as likely to be true of almost every thought that you have as the thought that you have. And she shows you how to do that in something called the work. Now we've put together a program together. I spoke with her out in Pasadena for an all-day workshop. They're putting it out, and we're like very, very close friends. So I'm talking to her, and she said, my husband is here with me. And I said, oh, what's his name? Oh, his name is Stephen Mitchell. I said, oh, really? Yeah, she's married to the guy who translated the Tao Te Ching. All right. So I said, enough. You know, in Hawaii, they have this thing, it's called, enough already. That's how they talk, right? So I said, so I began reading through it, and then I saw the whole controversy, and I just felt that he didn't get a fair shake there. You know, I really, I think when you have a choice to be right or to be kind, picking kind is really important, and he made a big mistake by not having a disclaimer at the beginning that some of the facts had been changed. But the man had helped so many people, and you know what? After I read it, I picked up the phone because his publisher had dropped him, and I said, look, I talked to Louise Hay, who's my publisher, and I said, you know, they're going to drop this guy from publishing, and she said, whatever he wants to publish, we'll publish, and we'll pay them whatever he was being paid. That's Louise. So I called, I got his number from Stephen. He had also forgotten to give credit to Stephen for the Tao Te Ching quotes throughout the Million Little Pieces, but he didn't know. He didn't know. And as soon as he found out, he corrected it, which he was willing to do with everything else as well. He's such a decent, really good, beautiful human being. And I called him and I told him about my daughter who was in rehab and was struggling with addictions and all of that. And he said, what's her name? And I said, look, if you just talk to her for 5 minutes, just for 5 minutes, because she read your book, it would mean so much to me, so much. And he said, I'll talk to her for 5 hours or 5 days, or I'll move in with her for 5 weeks if that's what it takes. I'll do whatever it takes to help her. And he did, and called her and encouraged her to stop the bullshit. As he said, stop all of the excuses and get on with your sobriety. And it made a huge impact in her life. So you can imagine I'm a bit of a fan. So this thing from this, called the Tao Te Ching, which he told me, he said, I read it every day. And each day when I read it, it was the only thing that got me through it, because I fought all the rest of it. And I thought, if somebody can be in that state where they're so close to death, and something written 2,500 years ago by a little Chinaman who just gave this to a guard and dictated it and said, these are the essential truths of life, and live them. I said, I've got to get into this thing. I've got to get in. And I talked to my publisher, I talked to Louise, I said, I'm going to take each of the 81 verses of the Tao, and I'm going to write for a year. And I started January the 1st of this year. And I'm going to start and write an essay every 3 or 4 days. But before I do, what I want to do is create a place. And this is something I really want you to think about. I want you to create a sacred place in your home, in your bedroom, wherever it might be, in your office, in your garage. It doesn't make any difference. And you don't need to you can live in a 1-bedroom apartment and do this. And in this sacred place, I'd like you to put your energy into it. I have a place like this on Maui, and it's a place that I revere. It's just a little dining room. But in it, it has everything that has sacred value to me in it. Books that people have sent me, photographs, crystals that people have offered to me in the way of... I had 4 different drawings of Lao Tzu, and I had them framed 8 by 10, and I have them right there as I look at them, along with one of Sai Baba, my teacher who comes and visits me in my soul and my dream and my heart, and has the gift of fish and loaves on this planet today. We'll be celebrating his 80th birthday in 2 weeks. There's this person who has this gift of fish and loaves, has manifested for me a Ziploc bag, a quart bag, like the kind you take on the airlines, filled with vibhuti. My answer to the airlines and not taking shampoo on a plane is right here. I want you to know. So in this sacred space where I light a candle every morning, in fact, I light 3 candles. One to Lao Tzu, one to Ralph Waldo Emerson, whose 8x10 photograph is in front of me, and one to Sai Baba. And they are there. And it may sound silly, but what happens as I walk by this sacred spot in my home where I do this writing with all of these things that are in it, as I walk by, I get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, as you know, if you watch the PBS show, between 3 and 4 every morning. And in that quiet time, when you're closest to God, as again Rumi said, the breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. Do not go back to sleep. Do not go back to sleep. You're all awakened between 3 and 4, virtually every one of you. That wake-up call is not an accident. It's a universal human experience. It's the quietest time. It's the time when there's the least distractions. God's one and only voice is silence. Silence. That place where you can be connected. And as you get up and fill your body with the supplements that you take, with the antioxidant drinks that you take, with whatever it is, the nanogreens that I drink, and all of the things that I fill myself with in the morning with this healthy, wonderful feeling of good things going through my body. Not coffee, not cigarettes, not poisons, but really life-affirming food. And as you walk by this place with the candles burning and so on, it will draw you into it. It will draw you there. You feel as if you have to enter this space, whatever it might be, your sacred space. And when you sit down in that space, in the middle of the night, and allow yourself to know that what you are here for is now going to be made manifest for you, you begin to allow it to come through you. Now, come on, everything is channeled. God writes all the books and builds all the bridges. I mean, who do you think is delivering this talk? This is just Renawayne Dyer. This isn't me. This is like these words that are coming here from where? Where are they coming from? Who owns these words that come here and go into this little thing that I'm holding in my hand and titillate the stapes in your ear so that you can hear these vibrations? We don't own any of this stuff. This isn't mine. I don't get any of this. I get the royalties. But it's not, it's like you begin to realize that you can be used as an instrument, as a vessel for anything. And when you get your ego out of it, and that's what Lao Tzu teaches more than anything else, about leadership particularly, and this is that the great leaders emulate the ocean. And what is the ocean but the greatest source of power on the planet? And why is the ocean the greatest source of power on the planet? Because it stays low. All of the rivers and all of the streams are all in work at flowing toward the ocean. It all flows back. And it flows back because the ocean doesn't lord itself over anyone. It practices radical humility. It stays low. It interferes not at all. It just allows. It allows everything. Non-interfering is probably the basis of the Tao. And we need to have an awareness of this in our leaders. Eventually, leadership, political leaders, community leaders, business leaders, when we have enough of us, and I'm doing a weekend seminar on living the Tao, inviting people from all over the planet to come to Maui next October and to be there for a way of living the Tao and putting it into practice everywhere in our lives. So that, I think it's the 57th verse of the Tao says that any country which has most of its energy invested in weapons is not of the Tao. And any country that has most of its energy invested in building homes and growing food for the masses and not interfering with them is connected to the Tao, is living the Tao. From a great distance, if you were to look at this planet, now I've been writing from a distance for the last year. Yesterday morning was the first morning this year that I got up and I didn't have to, I wasn't required by my inner passion to study the next verse of the Tao and then walk it for a day and then think about it and meditate it on a day. What a job. An incredible job. I can't even imagine what they pay me for it. That's all I have to do is get up, read the Tao, ask, and then meditate on it, swim on it, do yoga on it, all of the things that I do every day. And then one day, before I write it, look at these pictures of Lao Tzu, one sitting on an oxen, and ask him, you wrote it 2,500 years ago. The language is a little different than our language today. How do people apply this today in the 21st century? What would you say? And then I just put my arm on the table and allow it to flow through my heart and onto the page with my little purple pen and my white pad of paper. And writer's block is impossible when you're living your passion. When you're living your passion, you're living with God. When you're living with God, you're living love. You are not, and what does the Course in Miracles say? There's only two emotions. What are they? Love and fear. And all that is love, what? Cannot be fear. And all that is fear cannot be love. So fear and God are opposites. There's no fear, there's only love. And when you're in love and allowing, there's no blockages, there's no obstacles. All you have to do is align yourself in such a way that you allow it to happen. One of the great books that has just came out last week. I spoke up in San Francisco and I had 10 cases of these shipped up there in San Francisco. This is to me the profound teaching on the planet today. I learned so much from this. It's called The Law of Attraction. Esther and Jerry Hicks just came out. And it's all of the basics of the teachings of Abraham. So from a distance, it's a beautiful book. It's really worth reading. It's one you want to study. The teachings, I'll go a little bit into it a little bit more later on. But the idea of from a distance is that here's 2,500 years have passed. 2,500 years, but there's no time. So it's like Lao Tzu is here, and I could easily be getting the same information that was given to him to give only in the language of the 21st century. Why not? Why would there be anything to stop that when you think like that? And the Tao doesn't teach you to think big. It teaches you to think small. Thinking big is a mistake, according to the Tao. Because when you think big, you can't get big things done. We can only do things in this moment. So it teaches us to be in this moment. It says you can get anywhere from here. You can get anywhere from here. The key is you have to be here. Like, you have to totally be here. So that anything big that you want to do, like 19 years ago when I decided to give up alcohol, or when it was decided for me, because I was just being done. I did it. I know what addiction's about, and then I can teach about it. I lived in an orphanage for 10 years so that I could understand self-reliance. Then I could teach it. It's really simple.
Hi there. My name is Liz Dawn, and I am the co-creator of Celebrate Your Life events. And I hope you're loving this amazing workshop with the late and great Dr. Wayne Dyer. This was recorded live at one of our Celebrate Your Life conferences. And I'm so excited that we could share this very special workshop with all of the Evan Carmichael fans. And to learn more about us, just click the link below and visit celebrateyourlife.com.
You go through what you have to go through, even the torturous things that you have to go through, in order to be able to give. Because the most important thing that you can learn, according to Lao Tzu, is that when you are at one with what is called the hidden virtue, which is the hidden godliness, kindness, goodness, love that is in you and what you came from, when you are in harmony with that, all of your life is about giving. When you're not in harmony with the hidden virtue, all of your life is about getting. So you make the shift from getting, what's in it for me, how much am I going to make, how well am I going to do, what does my ego say, to how may I serve, what may I give, how can I do it. And if I'd have thought 19 years ago that I was going to not be able to have another beer for 19 years, it's too big. It's too big. You can't even do that. You can't not drink for 19 years. You can only not drink now. And that's easy. So you don't, even if you've got a great big project involved, you bring yourself down to what can we do here? Now, today. And that's what you do. What you can be here now, which is what all of nature knows to do. Every raccoon knows this. Every bat knows this. So from a distance, I've been talking to this man and wondering at the beginning, who am I? Do you know how many translations there are of the Tao that I came across when I Googled it? When I didn't Google it, my daughter Googled it. I don't know how to Google anything. I don't even have a computer. I've never done an email. I don't do emails. There's about 7,000 translations that just are translated into English of the Tao Te Ching, of the 81 verses. So, and they're similar, and some say this, and some use that word and this word. And I picked a dozen of the ones that seemed to be the most relevant. And I read, each time I would read 12 translations of the first verse of the Tao Te Ching. And then I would meditate on it. And then I would do yoga on it. And I would allow myself to just let it come into me. And sometimes when I would read one, I just thought, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to, and then I would let go of that. And just amazingly, and especially when I would enter that sacred space, it would just flow. It's just, I can only say it with all the passion that I feel it right now in this moment. It works if you're willing to let go. If you're willing to go back to what your life was like in the first 9 months and surrender and not worry and get out of the way and then be in a state of just gratitude. If the only prayer you say every day, if the only prayer you say is thank you, that's enough. You're on your way. It's staying in that state of gratitude and knowing and never fighting it. And whatever comes, even if it doesn't make any sense to you whatsoever, you embrace it. You embrace it because that passion that you feel is God speaking to you, saying, don't die with your music still in you. Don't get to that place. Everything looks different from a distance when you get back. Imagine stepping back and looking at this entire planet from a distance. And I kept thinking about that. And every time I would look at this picture of Lao Tzu and I would ask, and then the day before, the writing would be so sweet, so perfect. And I'd call my editor and I'd read it and I'd say, I'm Lao Tzu. What's going on here? I'm going to be speaking Chinese next. It was overwhelmingly powerful to do this. And then I heard a song. It was written by Julie Gold in 1985, and it was sung by Bette Midler in 1990 at the outbreak of the Gulf War. It touched me to a point where I got that gooseflesh, which I'm getting right now, when I heard that song, written by a 30-year-old girl. There's so many beautiful words in that song. I mean, does that war make any sense from a distance? I mean, when we look back at training people to go and kill other people, the Tao says the people, when you go to war, it says that the people will prevail who have no enemies, even if they have to go to war. And that all victories should be treated as a funeral. As a funeral. And an apology needs to be offered to all of those who were vanquished, saying we just didn't know a better way, but we'll figure one out. No enemies. Imagine a world in which there are no enemies. From a distance, I've been sitting there writing across the miles and across the centuries, listening to someone speak to me. When I don't even hear the voice, I just let it flow. And it flows out in perfect harmony. 540 individual pages, handwritten, which will be edited, all without one moment of doubt, without one moment of consideration for writer's block or not knowing whether it will happen. From that same perspective, for every single one of you in this room, there is an awareness that there is something grander and greater that awaits you when you get back to that first 9 months of your life, where you surrender and let go and allow it to come and flow. I want to read something to you from Carl Jung, who was a Taoist. I mean, he lived and talked and wrote a lot about the Tao. I was a Jungian therapist. I was trained in that discipline many years ago. It's called The Stages of Life. Now, there's a morning and an afternoon of your life, which is I'm going to write next. Starting January the 1st, I'm going to start on this. The morning of our life doesn't have anything to do with your age. Some people never have a morning of their life, like Jesus, Lao Tzu, Buddha, Zoroaster, the great spiritual teachers. They just show up And they don't have to go through certain kinds of things that we are trained. But I had a morning of my life and an afternoon and I'm in an evening. The morning of our lives, we are taught certain things from the time that we emerge from the womb. And what we are taught when we emerge from the womb is almost everything the opposite of living Tao consciousness, living the hidden virtues, living God realization. In the presence of a God-realized being, the laws of the material world do not apply. They just don't apply. Healing can take place instantaneously for anything. The right person can show up right out of nowhere in the biggest surprise that you've ever had. You can be in more than one place at the same time. You can manifest whatever it is that you need. It'll just be there. And it'll be too weird for you, but there it is. When you get in the presence, or when you yourself enter God realization, that's what I'm calling the afternoon of our life. Generally speaking, it takes place somewhere between the ages of 31 and 44, 45. Very generally speaking. But by and large, in the morning of our life, you learn from the people around you who are doing their absolute best to raise you to be good citizens, very likely. Mothers and fathers and grandparents and cultures and the church organizations and all the things. But most of it is designed to get you to fit in, to be a good person, to be a good family member, to follow the rules, to get good grades, to save for the future, to put your money away, to make sure that nobody steals your money from you, to have goals, to get through this class and that class, to get through this degree and that degree, to graduate, to get it to a certain job, to do whatever it takes on the job in order to get yourself a promotion. All of it being organized around getting more, attracting as much as you possibly can get. It's about getting. It's about getting, and it's about pleasing, and it's about fitting in, all of which are non-Tao principles. All three of those are total non-Tao principles, but that doesn't matter. It's not about the Tao when you're getting in the morning of your life. And then something happens. What I call a quantum shift takes place. And you move into something called the afternoon of your life or the evening of your life. And here, your values, your desires, what it is that is important to you have done a complete radical shift. It's no longer that important thing for you to be a good family member. It's no longer the most important thing for you to please your parents. It's no longer the most important thing for you to save for the future, or to get good grades, or even to get a good house, the right house. You begin to feel a sense of connectedness to everything and everyone. From a distance, you look at this planet and you think, how could anything on here be fighting each other? We're all breathing the same air. We all came from the same place. How could there possibly be enemies? When you look at it from that, there's an interconnectedness. That's why I've often said that it makes about as much sense to have a smoking section in a restaurant as it does to have a peeing section in a swimming pool. You know, it's just, no. You don't pee over there. You don't pee over there. That's not a peeing section. Over here's where you pee. Sounds a little crazy to me. Now you have to step inside to get a breath of fresh air. A breath of fresh air. Yeah, I said that right. So we start in the afternoon of our life. There is a shift. And the shift is usually preceded, not always, but it can be, and I invite you to open yourself to the possibility that you can invite in a quantum shift. And I'll describe it for you in just a moment. And as you get to one of these quantum shifts in your life, things that were so important to you in the morning of your life no longer are important. And I suggest that most people who would attend a conference such as this, here, in this beautiful place, on these beautiful days, and sit and listen to speakers from all over the world come and talk to you about it, that virtually everyone in this room is moving into or has moved into something called the afternoon of your life, in which the general priorities of your life, what you expect out of it, what you expect to do while you're here, have shifted. And it no longer satisfies you, it no longer fulfills you to live the afternoon of your life by the rules that you learned in the morning of your life. Here's what Jung said about all of this. Thoroughly unprepared, we take the step into the afternoon of life. Worse still, we take this step with the false presupposition that our truths and our ideas will serve us as hitherto. But we cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of life's morning. For what was great in the morning will be little at evening, and what in the morning was true will at evening have become a lie. It's so dramatic and so powerful that you get to the place, whether it's in your relationships or your work or your family or your community or your country, where you know you're living a lie. And it is increasingly intolerable for you to continue to do that. And people around you who are still stuck in the morning of their life are choosing to stay there and continue to seek after more stuff, accumulating more, getting more prestige, making more money, getting to another place, having a higher goal. People around, that becomes anathema. It becomes something that you feel like an infection in your body, just growing. And it isn't that these people or these events or this place or the things that you are doing, it isn't that they're bad, it isn't that anybody's done anything wrong. It's that you have taken on this shift. And generally, when you make this shift, I've got the summary, just a real brief summary of how this affects men and women. When a quantum change takes place, which I haven't described yet, but will. When it takes place and you move from the number one priority of your life being to get good grades, to fit in, to be a good daughter or a good mother, or to fit in with your family business or whatever it is that it might be, when that shift has completed itself, and you now realize that there's something greater, something grander, something more profound. Let me read to you one of the great ladies, one of the great writers ever. Her name's Lillian Smith. She wrote in the 40s. She died in the 70s, I believe, or 60s. There's an award, a literary award, given in her name, the Lillian Smith Award. She wrote a book that I'm asking Louise to, it's out of print, to republish. Hopefully I'll have it by next year. It's called The Journey. And in the 1940s, she went all through the South, and she looked at integration and the ways that whites were treating blacks in the South. It had a profound change. And when you read her, she had a double mastectomy also, which was not ever even talked about when she was writing in the 40s. And her writing is so profound. Well, this is what she says. She says, to pray, it is so necessary and so hard. Hard not because it requires intellect or knowledge or a big vocabulary or special techniques, but because it requires of us humility. And that comes, she said, I think, from a profound sense of one's brokenness and one's need. Not the need that comes and causes us to cry, get me out of this trouble, quick, please God, but the need that one feels every day of one's life, even though one does not acknowledge it, to be related to something bigger than oneself. It comes out of our brokenness. The need to be related to something bigger than our puny little egos, which convince us that who we are is our stuff and our accumulations and our achievements and our reputations. It's like we know that we need more than our stuff and our approval and our awards and our reputations to be connected. And that's a sense of brokenness. Broken from spirit. Broken from the return trip. Tao is the way of return. It's returning to the place from which we started and know it for the first time. And she says, but the need that one feels every day of one's life, even though one does not acknowledge it, to be related to something bigger than oneself, something more alive than oneself, something older and something not yet born that will endure through time. That was Lillian Smith writing in the introduction to The Journey. That out of this need to overcome this brokenness comes the afternoon of our life. Comes this time when we say, my connection to God, to Source, to Tao, to universal mind, to spirit, to that from which I originated, from which I can never be disconnected, which is who and what I am, my own divinity. It's never too late to teach that. And it's never too early to teach that. You can do it with your babies. This is why I've got two little children's books, two wonderful children's books. One's called Incredible You, and the other one just came out. It's called Unstoppable Me. So now we enter this thing, this change, this something takes over for us. And this thing called a quantum shift or a quantum change in our hearts takes over. And once it does, there's no going back. So now, let me describe first the quantum shift, the quantum change. In a book called Quantum Change, they suggest that when these things come into your life and the shift is on, that the experiences are so dramatic that they often are accompanied by voices that we hear and an energy that we experience in our life that no one else knows. Here's a friend of mine. His name's Bill W. Bill Wilson. Yeah. For those of you who don't know why they're clapping, he was the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. And before Bill W., when you had alcoholic psychosis, you just died. It was incurable. And he found something where he brought spirit and God and helped people to return to the source of well-being from which they originated and to live from there, which requires nothing external to ourselves in the way of substances. And he said these words about this, it's called the mystical type of quantum change. He said, "My depression deepened unbearably, and finally it seemed to me as though I were at the bottom of the pit. I still gagged badly at the notion of a power greater than myself." That's the ego at work. "But finally, just for a moment, the last vestige of my proud obstinacy was crushed. All at once, I found myself crying out, 'If there is a God, let him show himself. I am ready to do anything, anything.' And suddenly, the room lit up with a great white light. I was caught up into an ecstasy which there are no words to describe. It seemed to me, in the mind's eye, that I was on a mountain and that a wind, not of air, but of spirit, was blowing. And then it burst upon me that I was a free man." A wind of spirit. It happened for me when I left drinking 19 years ago. It was 4:07 a.m. and I awoke, and I had been thinking about this whole thing because I wasn't, and I never have been, and I am not now, an alcoholic. I drank every day. I drank 2 or 3 beers in the evening. I was never drunk. I just walked away from it when I had enough. None of the symptoms of alcohol. I've had many other labels that I've placed on myself, but that happens not to be one of them. I had a teacher in India who told me, if you want to reach the level of consciousness that you were destined to reach, and that is your vision, you have to leave alcohol behind. And I said, I have no trouble with that. I just want to have a couple of beers each day after I run. And he said, no, you will do it, and when you do it, it will be easy. And I awoke at 4:07 a.m., and I couldn't remember a day in the previous 15 years that I hadn't had at least 2 or 3 beers. And the room changed. There was almost like a spray in the room. It was, I can still smell it. It was a smell of almost like roses in the room. And I can remember everything that was on the dresser. I can remember the clothes that were hanging in the closet. I can remember the color of the sheets, exactly what I was wearing at that moment. Everything about that room I can still remember. And in the quantum change, they said there are 4 qualities or characteristics that come to you when you experience one of these shifts, and you can call upon it. 1 is that they are always a surprise. 2 is that they are extremely vivid. Very vivid, almost as if you're looking through different lenses and the colors get sharper and brighter. They are also always benevolent. That is, they are always, you feel like you're in the presence of something that is just overwhelmingly loving. Getting it now. It's like a kundalini. It's like a warm shower just running up and down your spine. It feels like pure love. It's why I always enter the room from the back. You can feel the love. You can feel that. And in one of those moments, you're in a benevolent experience. And 4th is that it's always enduring. So it's surprising, it's vivid, it's benevolent, and it endures. And it's 19 years later, and it happened yesterday. There was never even a thought of having alcohol again. And it wasn't like I stayed away from it. I worried about it. I didn't go to places. It was just out of my life. It was one of those quantum shifts. Now, you don't have to have a moment like that. It doesn't have to be where you have this magnificent kind of hearing a voice. Many people do hear voices. It can be anything at all that is so profound for you that you know that you have been visited by a force that you have always been connected to, but you're now listening to for the first time. And when it happens, for women, before one of these experiences, their number 1 through 5 priorities in their life, when asked to list the values that were most significant to them out of 60 choices, they picked 1, taking care of my family, 2, being independent. 3, having a career. 4, fitting in. And 5, being attractive. Those were the qualities and characteristics, the values that women picked. After one of these quantum experiences, the number one priority was their personal growth. The second was their self-esteem, feeling good about myself. Third was spirituality and staying connected to God. Fourth was a sense of happiness, my own personal happiness. And 5 was living in a spirit of generosity and giving. That was the shift that took place. That's a major shift. From taking care of my family to my own personal self-esteem and feeling good about myself. To, now for men, before and after, the number 1 through 5 qualities or characteristics, values out of the top 60 listed was, for men it was, this is before one of these quantum shifts, was wealth, the accumulation of wealth, which is what we're trained in, isn't it? Secondly was a sense of adventure. Third was feeling a sense of achievement in my life. Fourth was my own personal sense of pleasure. And 5th was to be respected by others. After one of these experiences, a visitation from Tao, a connection, a reconnection to Source, the number 1 quality and characteristic of a man, and this happened for me for sure, was spirituality. The second was personal peace. The third was family, taking care of and loving family. The fourth was living God's will, or living at God realization. And the 5th was honesty. Look at the shifts. Look at what happens, what takes place when these kinds of shifts come into our lives, when we go from the morning of our life, when our primary purpose in life is to live out this ego. And the ego is this idea that we have of who we are that says who I am is what other people think of me, and who I am is what I accumulate, and who I am is what I achieve. And that's the whole focus of my life. And the problem with that as a perspective of a way of living is that if you are what you have, then what you begin to realize is that when you don't have, then you aren't. And if you are what you do, and you no longer can do, whatever that can do is, then you aren't. And if you are what other people think of you, and what other people think of you changes, which it always does, then who you are has no substance, no value. It's located in something outside of yourself. So it's ephemeral and it's devastating if you want to get to the end of your life and not be able to, not have to say what Ivan Ilyich, Leo Tolstoy's famous character in The Death of Ivan Ilyich, said as he was lying on his deathbed, looking up at his wife whom he despised because he felt that she was responsible for all of the things that he had to do that he was unhappy with. And he looked into her eyes as he was dying and said, what if my whole life has been wrong? Can you imagine anything? I mean, just even saying that, it just is hurts inside. What if you had to go to the end of your life and say, what if my whole life has been wrong? And I think about these quantum moments and how they can come and when they can come. And there's a lady here in the room who has become one of the closest people in the world to me, someone I adore. Her name is Immaculée Ilibagiza. And she was in Rwanda in 1994, sitting in a bathroom, waiting to be executed by machetes, being hunted by Hutus, where they killed 1 million people from her tribal ancestry, the Tutsis. And she had a moment in that bathroom in which she was asking God, how can I love these people who are trying to kill me? And she was being hunted every day from April the 7th until July the 4th or 5th of 1994. And they spared no one. And she was told in a voice, you must love them. You must be able to send them love. And she said when she finally got that, a cross was placed across the room, an invisible cross that only she could see. And she knew, she didn't hope, she didn't think anymore that it might or might not. She had an absolute knowing that no one could penetrate that cross. 400 people with machetes searched that house 9 times within 90 days. It's a 2-bedroom bungalow house by American standards. And they never found her. She was just hidden with 7 other women behind a clothes valet. And they never looked there. And they looked everywhere, under the beds. They even looked in suitcases for babies, because they would hack the babies to death. And she wrote a book, which I wrote the foreword to, and when I met her, I knew I was in the presence of an angel. It's called Left to Tell. If you don't take anything else home from this conference, read. It's about the power of faith and what it can do to transform one's life. And when I read her manuscript, I knew I had to be involved in the publication. There's Immaculate. Immaculate. Stand up. Say hello to these people. Immaculate Ilabagiza. I love you. She's a saint who walks among us in many ways. Other ways, I have a little problem. But I traveled with her for 1.5 years, and she's become like, I don't know, a friend and a colleague and a daughter and a loving, beautiful partner in this whole vision of transforming the world. And 60 Minutes has just spent over $1 million went back to Africa with her and reunited all of the women but one who died of AIDS in the bathroom, and are telling her story. It'll be out. Watch for it within the next few weeks or months. It's all in the can and ready to go, and it's one of the great, great shows. You'll be seeing it on Left to Tell. This quantum shift, when it happens, when there's a knowing within you, and I started out by talking about passion, that when you have that passion, you are in balance. That's what being in balance really means. We have desires. And these desires, when they are aligned with Spirit, when these desires are so aligned with Spirit that we know that this is our passion, this is God speaking to us. This is my desire, and it's not about getting for me. It's about what I'm here to give and do, because giving is what God always does, asking nothing in return. It's about giving anonymously. The great Persian poet Hafiz said, in all the history of people, in the whole history of time, the sun has never said to the earth, you owe me. And then he said, just think what a love like that can do. It lights up the whole world. It lights up the whole world. In A Course in Miracles, there's this wonderful line of Jesus saying, if you want to be like me, I will help you. If you want to be like me, I will help you, knowing that we are alike. If you want to be different than me, I will wait until you change your mind. And you will change your mind. You may have to get back to that place, and the only way getting back to it may be to die. But you will change your mind. Now, I had a letter come to me that is so illustrative of all that I have been speaking here about this idea of quantum shifts, the interconnectedness of all things, and the awareness that we can get into the afternoon of our life, live out what our highest values are, and access whatever it is that we need by having passion about the outcome never being in doubt. Just having that passion. And the question is, can you do it? The question is, can you have the knowing? I've gotten this sort of reputation for being able to heal animals. I can't do it with people, but animals, for some reason, I have a very deep connection to St. Francis. And people, when they brought animals to me with like these huge tumors, cancerous tumors and so on, or a cat with leukemia, and I presented these cats for some reason, and when they say, can you do this? I say, absolutely. Well, don't you have any? No, I don't have any doubt at all. It's an absolute knowing. It's sort of like when they ask Sai Baba, this divine soul in Puttaparthi in India, on his 75th birthday, are you God? They ask him in front of all the cameras, with millions of people surrounding the village of Puttaparthi. He said, yes, I am. He said, and so are you. He said, the only difference between you and me is that I know it and you doubt it. Can you get to the non-doubting place? The absolute knowing that this inner beckoning, This feeling that you have inside about wanting your life to improve, about wanting to make a difference, about wanting to be closer to God, about wanting to promote peace in the world, about whatever it is that you have a knowing about. Are you able to banish the doubt in such a way that you're willing to invite whatever it is that's going to show up and know that it's all for your best, even if it shows up as an obstacle? So here's the letter that I received. I love this letter. It was written March the 20th, 2006. I was having the roughest time of my life. 3 years of pain, darkness, loss, and self-pity, not knowing how to cope. As usual, I got up early to feed my horses, opened the glass door, and at my feet was a tiny baby bird covered in down. I looked her over, and she was fine. I searched my entire acre, rooftop and all, trying to find her nest to put her back in safe and sound, but all to no avail. No nest anywhere to be seen. Where did she come from, and what am I going to feed her? I tried feeding her small bits of fruit. Nope. Then dug up worms. Nope. Then remembered having some seed in my garage, several different colors and sizes of seeds, and she would eat only the red ones. But she was eating, and I was happy. She was growing fast and became friends with my dog as they played together in the yard. My dog slapping her in the face and slapping my dog back with her wings. She loved riding my horse and would perch up on top of my thoroughbred's ass and take a ride. As she grew, I would help her to strengthen her wings so she could fly. And she would fly just a few feet at a time, but she always wanted to be with us. Me, my dog, and my horses. Every morning, around time to feed the horses, she would be at my kitchen window, knocking, "Let me in," or "Feed me," or something. Once in a while, she would come in and spend the night with us, but mostly she just wanted her meal. When she finally did learn to fly, I would take my dog for a walk, and I'd see her on my rooftop watching us walk away. "That's too far for me to fly. I'm scared," she seemed to be saying. And one morning during our walk, I could see her watching us. I called to her, "Come on, lover dover. Come on, lover dover. You can make it. Just try." I could see her attempting to take off, but she would back off and try again and again as we waited for her to half a block away. I'd call her again, "Come on, lover dover." And lo and behold, she took off, flapped her wings, and flew directly to my waiting hands. A half a block all by herself. By this time, she was at my kitchen window every single morning, knocking at my window for her breakfast. She would eat, then take off for the day, not to be seen until her evening meal. But she always came home. During this entire time, I was the saddest I had ever been in my life. I was alone, I was lonely, and I was afraid. Very little family and very few friends. My cousin from Buffalo called me one day to see how I was doing, and she asked me to come to Buffalo to visit for a week. I agreed to come because I thought it might do me some good. My mother agreed to take care of my house and my animals. "Mom," I said, as daughters say to their mothers, "be sure that Lover Dover comes home to eat. She will come to the window when she's ready, and she will knock," as hard as that is to believe. Mom laughed, but she agreed to care for Lover Dover. Nearly every day I would call Mom and ask if Lover Dover came home. And Mom would laugh and say, "Yes, she came to the window, she knocked, and I fed her." And she'd say, "Yes, well, that's a big load off my mind." She said, "I brought a couple of books with me to Buffalo to read on the plane. Self-help books, of course." She said, "I needed help with my sadness and my loneliness and my purpose in this world. And I looked everywhere, all the while asking, am I serving any purpose on this planet? Am I worthy of my blessings? Am I supposed to spend the rest of my days alone?" On my way back on the plane, I pulled out my book. I hadn't started it yet, but I started reading with chapter 1, a book by Wayne Dyer, who I believe is a highly evolved spiritual master. Well, she says, I got kind of bored with the first chapter. So much for the highly evolved spiritual master. And I started thumbing through the pages, reading paragraphs here and there, and just as the plane was ready to land, I felt an overwhelming feeling of sadness. I'm going home. But to what? The chores? The walls? The silence? Who will be happy to see me when I get home? Nobody. Trying to hide the tears flowing down my face from my neighbor on the plane, I flipped to the very last page of that book. There the author says, I want to end this book with one of my favorite poems entitled Guardian Angels. It deserves to be read slowly and lovingly. Well, I cannot express the warmth in my chest the moment I read the very first line of that poem. So this was written 20 years before that. It's called You'll See It When You Believe It. And this was my turning point when I wrote this book. It was the first book that I wrote that was not about psychology. It was about spirituality. Major shift in my life. Had to talk the publisher into it, said it wouldn't work and all of that. So here's how I ended this book. A sensitive Norwegian poet, Rolf Jacobson, wrote a beautiful poem entitled Guardian Angel. It deserves to be read slowly and lovingly. I am the bird that knocks at your window in the morning, and your companion whom you cannot know, the blossoms that light up for the blind. I am the glacier's crest above the forests, the dazzling one, and the brass voices from the cathedral towers. The thought that suddenly comes over you at midday and fills you with a singular happiness. I am the one you have loved long ago. I walked alongside you by day and look intently at you and put my mouth on your heart, but you don't know it. I am your third arm and your second shadow, the white one, whom you don't have the heart for and who can never, ever forget you. I am the bird that knocks at your window in the morning. Now, this book, the ending of that book, I don't have the time, but it could take me an hour to tell you the struggle I had about whether to include that poem in that book or not. I put it in, I took it out. I called my editor in New York. I said, I don't really think it's an appropriate ending to this. She said, then take it out. I said, okay, take it out. 24 hours before it was to be published, I put it back in. 12 hours before, I took it out. And the last hour before I had galley deadlines, I called up and said, put the damn thing in. I can't get it out of my mind. What's the connection between, am I doing it or was I being done? And was Rolf Jacobson in Norway writing this poem knowing about this woman out in Nevada who was desperate and lonely? Listen to the conclusion of her letter. Needless to say, I was overwhelmed by the message I had just received. Coincidence? I think not. That was one of the first times I had a genuine smile on my face in 3 years. It was the start of my healing and a blessing in disguise. Shortly thereafter, I never saw Lover Dover again. She didn't come home that morning or any morning thereafter. So, coincidences, all of that kind of thing, the interconnectedness between all of things, the awareness that when you begin to open your eyes and shift, what would motivate her to pick up that book 20 years after it was published? To carry it on a plane and to have me. And you know, that poem wasn't even a poem that I discovered. It was given to me by my very first doctoral student, Pat Murphy, at St. John's University in New York. He said, this is so beautiful. I think you should put it in your book. Back and forth. And you're doing it, and you're back, and you're forth, and you think that you've got it all handled. So the only thing I didn't mention was this wonderful, what I called my bathroom book. I didn't write it, but it's myself, Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, who is here, Mother Teresa, the Dalai Lama, Louise Hay, Ram Dass, Bernie Siegel, Scotty Peck, Joan Borysenko. I want you to put this in your bathroom because it replaces the energy that is leaving with the highest energy of the planet. There you are. The experience of God. And so we come to the end, at least the end of my presentation here. We shall not cease our exploration. And when we finish exploring, we shall return to the place from which we came and know it for the first time. But you don't have to die to go there. You can access a quantum moment. You can make the shift into the afternoon of your life and live it by those rules rather than anybody else's that were handed to you, so you no longer have to live that lie. I close with one of my all-time favorite poems from Mary Oliver, who I think is America's great contemporary poet. It's called Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I'll tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the great family of things. In every moment, ladies and gentlemen, every moment of your life, you have that great choice offered to us from the Course. You can either be a host to God, the Tao, or a hostage to your ego. It's your call. The wild geese are calling you home. Thank you, and God bless you. Namaste.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there. To watch another amazing Wayne Dyer video, check it out right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
I have a right to be happy. I have a right to be unhappy. You'll hear people say it all the time. I have a right to be miserable. And they go around defending their right to be miserable. And when you defend your right to be miserable, you attract exactly what you're defending into your life.